names in the field of dermatology also with us, and obviously Dr. Tom and Ishi ma'am as well on the panel today. And I think, as always, in the interest of time, we should quickly jump into the questions, because at the end of every session, I'm always regretting that why is it just 1 hour. So without wasting much time, we'll quickly jump in. And like all of you know, today's session is about skin-related disorders and the connect with wheat-related disorders. Although there has been a lot that has been studied and spoken about gluten and wheat and how it can exacerbate existing chronic conditions, how it can be a part of the etiology. But today, in this 1 hour session, we are going to try and focus on what role it exactly plays when it comes to different kinds of skin diseases. Also examples of how it has affected and improved the outcomes of various managements by studying wheat-related disorders. So I'll quickly start with Dr. Tom. And Dr. Tom, so there's so much that's been spoken about inflammation, and obviously inflammation does affect each and every organ of the body. And with skin also, we have seen a lot of skin conditions that can directly be affected. And if you would just like to take us through the broad fundamentals of inflammation, and also if you have a few slides to explain to us and our audience, that will be great to kick off today's session.
Thank you, Dr. Dang, and thank you to everyone on the panel. It's great to be here today, especially on this very important topic of skin-related conditions. And there's a larger view that I ask everyone to hold on this topic today. And I'm going to share my screen and show a few slides to help with the understanding of this larger view. So allow me, if I may, to bring up these slides. And one of the most important medical discoveries in the last 20 years has been that it's the immune system, when it gets activated, that produces inflammation, and that it dominates present-day morbidity, which means getting sick, and mortality, which means dying, worldwide. Inflammation dominates when you get sick and when you pass. To say a little more about that, chronic inflammatory diseases have been recognized as the most significant cause of death in the world today. And the National Institute of Health in the US tells us that 14 of the top 15 causes of death are chronic inflammatory diseases. Everything except unintentional injuries of the top causes of death are because there has been inflammation in the body for many years. And you may have felt fine when you have inflammation. You can't tell. It doesn't make you sick. It doesn't stop you from walking or living your life. But when you have excess amounts of inflammation, depending on where your genetic vulnerability is, that's where you're going to eventually show the symptoms. And I love this drawing from a medical journal article that came out 2 years ago, because it shows you that on the left side of the slide, whether it's infections from bacteria or viruses, or a lack of exercise, or having too much weight, or having an imbalance in your gut of the good and the bad bacteria, and there's too much bad bacteria, that's called dysbiosis, or the foods that you eat, or the internal stress hormones when there's too much stress, or if you're not getting enough sleep, or the chemicals that you're exposed to, it doesn't matter what the trigger is. When you cross the line of tolerance with that trigger, it turns the center wheel, which is inflammation throughout your body, called systemic inflammation. And when that wheel is turning, then depending on your genetics, it may manifest as diabetes or cardiovascular disease or cancer or depression or autoimmune diseases, or skin diseases, or brain deterioration diseases, or osteoporosis, or as you age, just losing your ability to think and for your immune system to function properly. It doesn't matter what the symptoms are. The mechanism is very similar for all of them. And I want for all of us to keep that in mind, that in today's topic, we're talking about skin conditions, but the concept, where does the inflammation come from that's creating my skin condition? That's a very important concept to keep in mind and to investigate. Thank you, Dr. Dang, for the opportunity.
Thank you, Dr. Tom. So it always goes hand in hand, not only the starting or the etiology of any kind of skin disease, and inflammation can obviously be a very important part to it, but also it exacerbating and the acute flare-ups that we see in a lot of skin conditions. So your slide, especially that drawing, is really interesting, and I would like to keep it also to refer to it later. But quickly moving on to Dr. Kandhari sir also, and firstly, sir, it's so nice to have you in today's panel. And
Thank you, Arjun.
we have a lot of people who've logged in today to hear your thoughts on this as well. And traditionally, sir, we've seen how food sensitivities can exacerbate this inflammation that Dr. Tom was talking about, and then have a lot of impact on ongoing skin disorders as well. And anything that you would like to tell our audience and teach us about what this connection between the skin and the gut is really about, and your real life experiences with patients that we can all learn from.
Thank you, Arjun. There's a lot of research which is going on in this process, and I thank Tom for having introduced us to the process of inflammation. Now, how does this manifest into skin disease as such? That is what we have to understand. So if there is a dysbiosis, which Tom had already explained, this acts upon the immune response, both innate as well as the adoptive, and then affects the barrier function itself. Now, this is brought about by affecting the short-chain fatty acids, vitamin D, and also the expression of Th17 cells. Once this happens, there is a leaky gut. Now, this leaky gut leads to an increased risk of pathogenic invasion or bacterial toxins or dietary antigens. Once this happens, this gives rise to inflammation systemically as well as in the skin. So once it is there in the skin, then the skin starts losing its integrity, especially the barrier function. And once the barrier function is lost, the skin or the antigens from outside start coming in, and you start getting skin disease. And systemically, it gives rise to autoimmune diseases. That's how I understand. Now, if in this process, we start treating it and looking at clinical evidence. In clinical evidence, there's one disease, dermatitis herpetiformis, which we are sure of that it's related to the gut, which we call celiac disease. If you restrict celiac in this, then the condition starts improving. There are other, I can name a few of them. I've written them down: IgA linear dermatosis, alopecia areata, polymyositis, prurigo, chronic spontaneous urticaria, annular erythemas, aphthous ulcers, ichthyosis, and so many other vasculitic diseases, which improved with a gluten-free diet. So that obviously means there is a relationship between the gut and the skin axis. Now, you also asked me about food sensitivity in hair disorders.
That's right.
In hair disorders, we don't talk about food sensitivities. We talk about only deficiencies. It's not an allergy which affects the hair. It's the food or the deficiency of a food. And in the food, we have three main things predominantly. One is iron. Second, which I notice in my own practice, is vitamin B12. Third is protein, and vitamin D sometimes. These are the four main things which affect us. So I've essentially told you now, if we give probiotics, it affects by bringing down the vitamin D receptors to a better form so that it improves the integrity of the skin as well as the gut. Similarly, by giving this it also improves the short chain fatty acid expression. So it again improves the gut. And finally, it also has an impact upon the epithelial integrity. So this is an evidence that we have from atopic dermatitis patients in which we have seen that probiotics affect it. That's all I have to say for the question that you've asked me, and we can go ahead further.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much, and that's very interesting to learn not only about hair and the gut, but also the other various examples that you had given, where there is a definite evidence that changing your diet can affect these various skin diseases. So, Dr. Mankul, quickly coming to you, and this is also something that we've discussed offline also. But today, like what Dr. Kandhari sir was also saying, that how these different foods that we eat and the diet and the gut and the skin axis can not only affect the gut microbiome, but also lead to the leaky gut that causes malabsorption and the deficiency of various minerals and micronutrients, etc. And there's a lot of connect in real life, also in your clinical practice, also with patients. Could you tell us a little bit about that? And then post that, probably we can also move down to any real patient case that you have, or if any patient is available to speak with us and tell about their experience also.
Right. Thank you, Dr. Arjun. So in my experience, I've been working on this for past 7-8 years and quite passionate about it. And largely, I would say that as Dr. Kandhari mentioned, there are largely 3 ways in which a gluten intolerance can have an impact. One is creating nutritional deficiencies through leaky gut. Second is by being a source of inflammation and chronic inflammation, fueling autoimmune disorders or allergies. And third, very often, it also contributes to hormonal issues, insulin resistance, polycystic ovaries. And largely, if you look at these 3 things, nutritional deficiencies, autoimmune and allergies, and insulin resistance, these form the broad part of the pathogenesis of any kind of skin disorder, which is chronic in nature. And so by working and identifying patients who actually have gluten intolerance, whether it is celiac disease or non-celiac disease, just to help the viewers understand the difference, gluten sensitivity means any person in whom there is an inflammatory response to gluten protein. And that inflammation can be picked up through a test called TTG or gliadin antibodies. If they're positive, if an endoscopy is positive, we call it celiac disease. But there's a large percentage of people who may not have these tests positive, and yet they might still have an inflammatory response to wheat. And if we have to give you an approximate figure, celiac disease may be present in 1 or 2 in 100. And that rate is also increasing. But non-celiac gluten sensitivity is estimated to be somewhere varying figures from 15 to 30%. So out of 100 people, 15 to 30% of the people might have non-celiac gluten sensitivity. So once what I have found in my practice that we are able to identify those percentage of people, how it has translated into results is that in some people, there is a dramatic improvement in response to eliminating gluten in their diet. And then there is a subset of people who we are able to reduce their load of medications. Let's say they are on medications which are immunosuppressants, medicines like steroids, and many other medicines. So we are able to reduce them by a good 50%. And we also see that the body's capacity to digest medicines and accept medicine goes up. Their level of side effects to the medicines goes down. And also overall sense of well-being really improves in those individuals. Just to, two very, two conditions where we have seen a lot of response in patients. One is vitiligo, and I wish that patient could join today, but there was a girl who was 6 years old, and I remember her coming in the lap of her mother. She had vitiligo, and she'd been seeing a dermatologist in Delhi for 2 years, and she was taking steroids and she would improve. And the moment she would stop steroids, her vitiligo would relapse and she would have new white patches. And she was found to be PTG, which is the celiac disease test positive. And we eliminated wheat, and me and she, madam, were working together on the case. And within 3 months, her white patches cleared up without any immunosuppressants. And also, she was going to a special school at that time. So since gluten intolerance has a huge impact, not just on the skin, but central nervous system, the moment she left gluten, her performance in the school improved and she was able to join regular school. So we would have these dramatic stories as well. And this is not just for vitiligo. We have had, I would say I've had such dramatic stories, about 4 or 5, but there are many cases where we have been able to make a significant difference. We also probably have a girl, Saloni, joining in. So her story is also amazing because she's now 22. And when she was 16, she started having strong, severe nodulocystic acne. And that was severe acne. And she was seeing dermatologists all across Delhi, and she was not getting better. And she was intolerant to isotretinoin. She just could not tolerate it, which is one of the go-to medicine if acne is not responding. So she kept going pillar to post. And when she was around 20, she came to me. She had no digestive issue whatsoever. And me being a dermatologist who's highly sensitive of gluten sensitivity, did not consider it at that time because she didn't have any digestive issues. I treated her for her hormonal issues for 2 months and there was no response whatsoever. We did her TTG and gliadin, they were negative. But then even when that was also negative, we did a food intolerance test for her, which was positive for gluten. As a last hope, we asked her to eliminate gluten. And from her visits in my clinic, which were every 3 weeks, she didn't turn up for 2 months. And she came back after 2 months with an absolutely clear skin. And now she's been on a diet like that for 1.5 years. And she knows it very clearly that the moment she eats gluten, she gets acne. And I hope she's there. I'm not too sure, but if she's there, maybe she can speak. But so the idea, the message is very clear that there are patients who might be celiac and might have skin-related disorders, whether it is the most common that we have seen is vitiligo, white patch disease, alopecia areata, where there are bald patches, or there is psoriasis, atopic dermatitis. I have seen lesser patients who have gluten sensitivity per se as the main cause, but there are definite cases who also have, atopic dermatitis patients who have gluten also as a significant cause. Hair fall, just pure telogen effluvium because of nutritional deficiencies, hormonal disorders, acne. These are some of the most common conditions where we have observed a certain subset of patients who improve remarkably with this. But the second message just want to pass on is that it's not for everyone. It's not like every case is so dramatic. We do have cases which we do it and we don't see any response whatsoever. And the patient is left frustrated and making such changes, and it has not had any impact. So we do see both the pictures. Thank you. Please go ahead, Dr. Tom.
Thank you, Dr. Mankul. Over to Dr. Tom. I think Dr. Tom has a point.
Yes, I'm just jumping to say what a wonderful presentation from Dr. Goyal. Wonderful. And for everyone who's listening to this, he said many things that were important, but one that was very, very important. This girl did not have any digestive issues. She did not have any gut problems. No one would have thought that food had anything to do with her skin condition and that what she was eating was causing it, because she felt fine when she would eat the food. And that is very, very common, that people don't feel bad when they eat the food, so they think it's okay, but inside your immune system is trying to fight that food, creating so much inflammation, and it manifests wherever your genetic vulnerability is. And in this girl, it was her skin. That's a very important concept as a takeaway today, that you do not have to feel bad when you eat the food. And even the tests were negative for this girl. The blood tests were negative. But as a last resort, they said, well, let's try a gluten-free diet. And because of experience, and many doctors have had that experience where the tests are negative, everything they've tried is negative, but let's just try this for a few weeks and see what happens. And the results can be dramatic.
Tom, I'd like you to mention about the test that you told us, that if these tests are negative, you're now having a test which is positive silicon something.
There is new technology that has developed in 2015. The laboratory opened in the United States, where the tests are much more sensitive for wheat-related disorders. TTG, the test for celiac disease, is a very good test for celiac disease when it's at the end, when you have full-blown celiac disease. If you have early celiac disease, the test is not very good at all. It's wrong 7 out of 10 times with early celiac. But for full celiac disease, that test is right on the money. But we always want to identify people as early as possible. So TTG has been shown to not be the test to depend on. And the technology is now developed. It's called silicone chip technology. And the best way to explain it is that if I told you in 1995 that, in about 25 years or so, I'm going to hold this little black thing in my hand. And if I push a couple of buttons on this black thing, and I can tell you in 5 seconds that the air particulate matter in Spiazzo, Italy right now is 10. It's a good day to exercise outside. Chicago is 26. It's a good day. But if you go to San Diego, it's 71. Do not exercise outside today. There's too much pollution in the air. And if I told you that 25 years ago, that I'd be able to find out anything I want to know in the world in 5 to 10 seconds, you would have thought I was a nutcase and I'd been watching too much Star Trek. But technology improves. And the same type of concept is true in laboratory medicine. Technology improves. And the new technology is much more sensitive to identify a wheat-related disorder with or without celiac disease. And those tests are just becoming available now internationally. They've been in the United States for 6 years, and they're just beginning. So I think it'll probably be 6 months to a year or more before it's easy to get these tests in India, but they're coming.
Thank you, Dr. Tom. I'm taking mental notes of this, and I'm going to keep myself updated on this. Seems very, very interesting, and
yes,
also need of the
especially
hour.
the laboratory people. If they can get this test, it will be of great value to us as clinicians, and also to the public at large who are suspecting gluten, but TTG is not telling them that you have a pre-gluten sort of a value which is possible, and you detect it early.
Absolutely,
It's something
absolutely,
very nice.
Sir.
And
Thank you.
learn.
Thank you, Dr. Tom. Thank you, Dr. Kandhari. So quickly moving on to Ishi ma'am, and ma'am would like to hear your points of view, and also as a clinical nutritionist, having seen thousands of patients over decades, what is your experience been between the gut and skin connection, and about the microbiome, how it can affect existing skin conditions and overall inflammation in the body? And also, I've chatted with you offline earlier, and we've discussed about deficiencies also, and which are the main vitamin and mineral deficiencies that you feel that can be attributed to the accentuation of any existing condition that the patient might have?
Well, I think so much has been already said about this, and I would just say ditto from all the three panelists. I have had similar experiences, and I think what has happened is we have come a long way when it comes to the connection between our diet, our food, and our skin. I remember as children we were told that you eat your greens and you eat the yellow vegetables and the red orange vegetables, your skin will be good. So those connections were there. And if you don't have too much tea, coffee, your skin will be less brown. And if you have milk, it will be better and whiter for those people around. Milk drinking people have better skins. And I think we are eating our own words and probably saying quite the contrary. So I think from there, those connections, those early days to understanding the importance of, retinoids and vitamin A, vitamin E, and the B vitamins, iron, and vitamin C. So all of these and omega-3s, the good fats, these associations were there in early days. But so that was a nutritional component and the connection. And then we came to what we saw, insulin, metabolic, endocrine sort of picture emerging in people who had skin conditions like acne and all these conditions which have been spoken about. And therefore, we started talking about sugars, we started talking about carbohydrates, high glycemic load in the diet. And so we started cutting back on those kind of foods and managed the patients fairly all right. But I would say we would just manage them, but I don't think we were hitting the right. Some patients got better, some just got better, till we came down to the inflammatory component. So from nutrition to insulin to then the inflammatory component, the last 2 decades, which has given us a complete paradigm shift in the thinking, the perspective, and the outcomes. And to be honest, I mean, I never really thought that autoimmune problems could be treated with, diet, because we always said, oh, we have vitiligo, we don't know, it's autoimmune. Why it happens, we don't know. And I was startled by one of my patients who came to me for weight loss. He had vitiligo since he was age, had no brown patch on his body. I was treating him for his weight, and I changed the flour in his diet to be a low glycemic alternate grain flour. And by the time he came for his follow-up after 3 weeks, he had, he came back with his reports, and I noticed something which was suggesting of wheat sensitivity. It was not celiac disease, mind you. So I just happened to make a remark, and I said, maybe your vitiligo that you have since childhood could be related to your food and your diet. And I just made a random comment at back. He said, ma'am, ever since I'm doing this years, he was, and his father had done. Homeopathy, all the, by 6 weeks, he had spots on his face. And there was like, I mean, I was really surprised. And I said I was going to go just to ask what I'd taken aback. But what happened was he became his own control because he went off the diet and he started eating regular wheat and the regular flour, and it was such a, so like that, by default, we made those connections. And today I see acne, I see alopecia, clearing up, and today we see.
Dr. Dang, may I suggest that we
Yes, I think
if we send a message to send a message to her to disconnect and reconnect again.
Absolutely.
Yes. So let's.
Her bandwidth seems to be a little low. That's what is being mentioned in my computer, that her bandwidth is low. So I don't know. I'm not a technical guy, so.
No worries. I think.
Ma'am, I can recommend that you switch off your video and keep the audio on. It should work just fine.
I don't know what I can do.
Great. No worries at all.
Okay.
Till Ishi ma'am
so
reconnects again.
is that better?
You can
Yes.
just.
We're not sure.
Should I continue? Should I continue?
Yeah, you can try now, ma'am.
Okay. So basically what I'm saying is that we see these connections every single day with skin and dry skin, acne and alopecia, vitiligo, which are absolutely all we are doing is we are looking at the gut, we are looking at food sensitivities, and understanding the connection between wheat, dairy, and these skin conditions not do require. The one question, okay, I think you can continue.
Great. Thank you, ma'am. That's very enlightening. Although we couldn't hear it
My
completely.
apologies on this, but
No worries at all. So, Dr. Kandari, I'll quickly jump on to you to this question that I wanted to ask you, and it is mainly around these allergies that we see, and various kind of hives and urticaria, etc., that you would see in your clinical practice, and even in the pediatric age group, and with immediate allergies and this kind of gut microbiome and the diet that we've been discussing. Anything, sir, from your side that can probably enlighten us on this particular topic related to urticaria and any kind of allergies that you would be seeing in your patients?
Well, essentially, allergy and diet and gut have a relationship in a disease which we call atopic dermatitis, very common in the West. There's been a debate whether to give probiotics or not to give probiotics. And now the world is changing that probiotics do help. And also if the probiotics help, how do they help? It is believed that the gut bacteria, the ratios of the commensals change. And once this ratio changes, and if we give a probiotic, which can reverse this ratio back towards normal, the disease starts improving. So that's where the role of the probiotic comes in. Also, these sensitizations to particular foods and atopics, they don't last too long. They last for some time, and by about 1 year, 1.5 years, 2 years at the max, they go away. So there is some sort of an immune tolerance which develops, and then these start going away. Why that immune tolerance develops, I'm not too clear about that. But yes, immune tolerance is known, and we see that in practice that a child who was having this in the earlier phases starts getting out of that phase. That's the only place where I have really seen it. As far as acne is concerned, there's been a lot of talk about acne being aggravated by a high glycemic index and also milk. Now, I have always said that in India, when you take milk, you go to the rural populations and they take milk in plenty, but they hardly have any acne. Why is this so? So that question is difficult to answer. So whether milk really has a role to play, or is it the hormones which are added to the milk that are playing a role? It's controversial at this moment. So our own guidelines in acne as of now say that, okay, milk is possibly responsible, but it's not causative totally. So these are the two main places. Of
Great,
course, I've
thank you,
already
sir.
told you about
So, Dr. Tom,
dermatitis,
one
herpetic
question that
forms.
I would like to understand from you.
Yes.
Yes. So Dr. Tom, one thing that I would like to ask you was around. So we do understand that wheat in certain cases obviously a contributor to skin-related disorders. But is wheat the only thing, or diet as a whole? And what other points would you have for people who are watching this? Apart from wheat, what are the other things that one can change in their diet and perhaps lifestyle when it comes to tackling these skin-related conditions?
Thank you. Yes, as we referenced earlier, the new technology in laboratory testing that is coming out now gives us so much more information than we knew before. For example, as Dr. Sanjeev said about milk, it's been a question for many years. Is it the hormones, the contaminants in the milk, or is it the milk? In the world of wheat-related disorders, we now have tests that can look at 26 different components of wheat, not just the whole wheat molecule. So we can see that sometimes it's the gluten proteins, sometimes it's the gluteomorphin proteins, sometimes it's the amylase trypsin inhibitors in wheat, sometimes it's the glutenins, that there are many different components. And our technology is improving to allow us to identify where it's coming from. The same thing is true with dairy, that the tests that are now available look at many different components of dairy and not just the entire molecule. The same tests are available for soy and for corn that look at many different smaller sub-proteins called peptides of different foods that may be toxins for people. And what is likely the main passageway by which these proteins can become toxic? It's the microbiome. It's the environment of the gut, because we've been using too much sugar in our lives. We drink too much soda pop when we were younger, perhaps. We eat processed foods. All of these things change the environment of the microbiome in our gut. And the result of having an imbalanced microbiome is that we become more sensitive to foods that may have been a little bit of an irritation before, but now they become more of an antagonist to cause inflammation. So one of the takeaways today that we hope everyone has is to learn more how to build a healthy microbiome to protect you. Of course, stop throwing the food in that's triggering the inflammation, and that's where the new tests help so much, but also trial and error, as Dr. Manko showed. Just after everything else, we suggested a gluten-free diet and she got better. So trial and error can help, but the takeaway is foods are often the primary trigger that creates the inflammatory environment in the gut, that then creates the leaky gut, that then creates the systemic inflammation that manifests on your skin. So some of the takeaways today for people, besides all this geeky science stuff that you're hearing, what do? Learn how to build a healthy microbiome. Learn how to feed the good guys in your gut and not feed the bad guys. And for that, I would suggest Ishimam to talk to us about how to build a healthier microbiome.
Great. So I think
my connectivity will not allow me to
No, but
speak.
at
Can you
the
hear me?
moment, you're quite okay. Yeah.
yes, now
At the
it's
moment,
fine, ma'am.
it's okay. Yeah, well, yes, we do need to address the gut microbiome, and feeding a good fiber, having fermented foods, having enough water, and not having inflammatory foods, like not having processed foods, chemicals, additives, pesticides, all of those things should be taken out or minimized as far as possible. And eating brightly colored vegetables, predominantly eating the right kind of grains, and addressing your digestion. So if you feel, sometimes you may not even know that you're not having, the microbes are not in balance, but if you have a skin condition, so this is a point which I'm wanting to take an opportunity to talk about, is that when you get a skin condition and you come back and say that, hey, you need to go off gluten, the patient can very rationally ask you that, I have eaten it all my life. What's happened now? So that's a very, very important, question which needs to be understood. That maybe you were taking antibiotics, maybe you were under stress, maybe you just delivered baby, maybe you had some hormones, something that has gone wrong in your immune system to cause the dysbiosis and the inflammation. So you may have eaten wheat all your life, but you may develop acne because of wheat even when you're an adult. So those questions are very rational and need to be understood. So yes, an anti-inflammatory diet is also something which will help building a good microbiome. Some are under stress in terms of medication or illness or surgery, something to support your gut with probiotics, and that should be taken under supervision or unless you're take. So, so both prebiotics, probiotics, and fermented foods, which we call postbiotics, are important and should be taken along with addressing nutritional deficiency. Integrated approach, which means a healthy lifestyle, not taking too much of alcohol, smoking, and doing yoga and meditation. So I think again I'm losing my connectivity, so I'll stop.
Great. So Dr. Mankul, over to you. I think you have a point, and also if Saloni can join us for a minute, that will be great.
Yeah, I think Saloni is there, and I'll talk to her. I just thought of few more messages, take-home messages. One is the difference between gluten allergy, wheat allergy, and gluten intolerance. So wheat allergy is something generally we see in children, and it is kind of an immediate response. Our immune system has multiple aspects to it. You can see it as our defense has an army, it has a navy, it has an air force. So same way we have different kinds of antibodies in our system, IgE, IgG, IgA. So wheat allergy is IgE mediated. Generally, it is kind of an immediate reaction and has more of a role in childhood. And it's a part of not an intolerant immune system, but an immature immune system, which is learning to mature. And as it matures, that IgE-mediated allergy tends to subside. An elimination for just a few days might also show us a response in an IgE-mediated allergy. But what we are seeing more often, especially in adults, is an intolerance, which is IgG mediated. If IgE is Air Force, which attacks very fast, IgG is our army, which goes very slow. So the response, an IgE mediated response, may be seen after 48, 72 hours, up to 7 days. So a person eliminating for 3 days wheat may not see an improvement in their symptoms. The elimination has to be minimum for 3 weeks to 5 weeks in order for them to feel better. So that's one way to differentiate. Dr. Arjun talked about the role of other foods as well. And one of the things that we like to use in our practice is kind of a 6-food elimination, where we eliminate all 6 common allergens: wheat, milk, soy, nuts, yeast, and egg for 2 weeks out of people's diet. And we don't give them any medications. If their allergic symptoms, whether it's urticaria or it's atopic dermatitis, it improves significantly during those 2 weeks. It gives us an idea that probably one of these foods is involved, one or more than one food. Why not go one by one? Because very often there are more than one food involved. If you go one by one, then the person is not responding, and the person sort of checks it out that this is not the cause behind my illness. The second reason is that if you go one by one, beyond a certain point, the person loses motivation. So it's just good to go all out for 2 weeks and then see what happens. So a 6-food elimination diet is a good option. Third is that Dr. Arjun talked about urticaria. I haven't had any patient, to be honest, where urticaria was there and we eliminated gluten and it just stopped miraculously. But in the subset of patients with Hashimoto thyroiditis, I've seen that the urticaria intensity goes down significantly in many patients by eliminating gluten. Fourth is probably a difference between dairy intolerance and lactose intolerance. It's a very common confusion that people have, because if anybody has any digestive issue, the first thing that goes from our gut lining is lactase enzyme, which basically digests a carbohydrate called lactose, which is present in our milk. And if the body is not able to digest it, we have a loose motion. But that doesn't mean that the person has a milk protein intolerance, and they might even do well with a lactose-free milk. But what we are here to discuss is a milk protein intolerance, which is also a very common issue and is also almost equally or more prevalent than gluten intolerance and has a strong role to play in all these conditions. And the last key message that I wanted to pass on is that gluten is not the root cause of disease in many cases. It is also a symptom of a chronic inflammation developing because of chronic stress, bad diet, bad life choices, genetics, a lot of other factors. So it is, I mean, some people go about thinking, oh, gluten is the root cause behind all my problems. And then they are left disappointed when they discover that at best it was a contributory factor. It was not the cause behind all their problems in life. So these are the 5 messages that I had. Thank you, Arjun, for the time. And Saloni, I think you are there. If you're there, I think we can take a pause for 5 seconds. If you can just...
Dr. Goel, I was just checking. Miss Dhankar was there, but she is not there now. Saloni Dhankar was there.
I'm here. I
Oh,
read.
she's there.
Okay,
Yes.
she's
there.
got your pass. Okay, cool. All right then.
So, sir, as you all heard, so I'm 22 now, and I have had acne for so many years, and I have been to like 5-7 doctors, and I don't think it helped at all because all of them were giving me medicines only to eat. And the thing with me is that I can't digest medicines very well. I don't like them. So when I came to Dr. Mankul, first we also tried on some medicines, but those were also having same effects on me. So then we had an allergy test, and it turned out that I had gluten sensitivity. Sir told me. So he told me that I had to stop eating gluten and wheat and everything. And at first it was like very tough for me to leave it because you have been eating something for such a long time altogether, and leaving it all of a sudden was a very big change for me. But within 1 month, I saw that most of my major acne, those were like cyst and everything, they were slowly decreasing. And now it's been 1.5 years. I have left gluten, dairy completely. And I have had such a clear skin, such good results. And the thing is that whenever I eat a little bit of gluten also now, it just acts up. Like now, if I eat a little bit, I will get some acne. So I think staying off of gluten has been a very good decision for me till now.
Thank you so much, Saloni. Thank you. God bless.
Yes, sir.
I have a phrase that I have used for years when I'm teaching about this concept of what Saloni just talked about. And the phrase is, once you've crossed the line of tolerance and your immune system is fighting wheat, you can't have a little. You can't be a little pregnant. You can't have a little wheat. Once your immune system is fighting wheat, it takes less than 1/8 of a thumbnail to activate the inflammation in the body. So the idea of low gluten diets or cheat days, there's no science to that whatsoever, and it will continue to fuel the inflammatory cascade. So once again, you can't be a little pregnant and you can't have a little wheat once you've crossed that line of tolerance.
We used to see the same thing what you're talking about in urticaria. We used to have an urticaria clinic at AIIMS, and especially the acute urticarias, which are often IgE mediated, have a lot to do with diet. Mankal said that he's not convinced about that, but I have seen it with my own eyes. We used to do this food intolerance test, what we call diet elimination test. Lots of food we used to find out. And this can be done in 2 ways, either total diet elimination, that means you eliminate the diet completely for 2 days, just giving water and sugar and salt. And from 3rd day, you add 1 new item. Or you do restricted diet elimination, That means you just have 2 items in food, let's say dal and rice for 2 days along with water and nothing else. And from the 3rd day, you start adding things and you find out that not only one food, a lot of foods can give rise to allergy, especially if it's an acute urticaria less than 6 weeks in duration. This I have seen in the clinic by my own self, and we used to do this routinely. It's still being done at All India Institute. We are still doing this test. Diet elimination, I believe, is the gold standard test to know which food you are allergic to or not allergic.
Thank you, Dr. Kandhari. So as we come to the closing of the session, there are many things that have been said, but like in every session, if we have a few minutes, I usually have a last round where any one key thing related to the topic that we have hundreds of attendees today, and one key thing from your side that you'd like them to remember and take back and probably try and follow. What would that be? So Dr. Tom, starting with you, and then it can go through all the panelists.
Thank you so much. So the key point to take away is from today, I hope for everyone, is the realization that it is inflammation that's causing the skin condition that you may be experiencing. It's not a problem of the skin. That's just where the manifestation is showing. And so you have to investigate, where is the inflammation coming from? And as our renowned dermatologists are telling us today, food is often the trigger, and not just gluten, but gluten is a primary, but it's foods. And you may think you're eating a healthy food and you feel fine in your stomach when you eat the food, but it may be causing the inflammation related symptoms in your skin. That's a key takeaway for me from today. And also, unfortunately, the connection was not so good, but what Ishiman was saying about rebuilding the microbiome is very, very important. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Tom. So, Ishimam, over to you. Can I just request you to shut your video and try just using audio? I'm 99% sure it'll work fine. Perfect.
Well, I hope so. So yes, coming to an important part of the diet is that we have a whole concept called cross-reactivity, which means that it's not only wheat or gluten, which could be your trigger, even though if it's a primary trigger, but several grains sort of mimic wheat and for the immune system behave the same way and are triggers. And that's a whole concept called cross-reactivity. And it's important to the audience to know that it could be corn, it could be soy, it could be oats, and some other minor grains, which I actually confirm almost like 100% in my clinical practice. Because very often people continue to have symptoms, low-grade inflammation continues when these grains are being taken without realizing, as a part of a gluten-free diet, so to say, which is right. And these are also parts of gluten-free alternative foods, which people get and buy. And these need to be looked at, labels need to be looked at, and to really cut down complete or lower inflammation effectively, the issue of cross-reactivity must be understood and practiced. So I'd leave it at that.
Thank you, ma'am. That was crystal clear. And I'm so glad we could get the closing comments from you. Dr. Kandhari, over to you, if there's any kind of take home for our audience today.
Arjun, most of the things have been said, but I'd like to reiterate what Tom had said in his first slide, that yes, dysbiosis food is an important aspect giving rise to skin disease and inflammation, but that's not the only thing. There are other factors, environment, obesity, genetics, which also play a major role in getting us to the inflammatory component. Which part is acting where? This puzzle has to be solved. But what he said in the first slide is a very important slide, that it's not one factor, it's multiple factors, of which gut and the skin axis is one of them. Yes. You can see chronic infection, physical and activity, obesity. Obesity gives rise to, inflammation and increased in insulin. And insulin gives rise to inflammation, and that's how metformin starts acting, because it attacks the inflammatory component also, besides acting on the insulin resistance. So it's not just the diet and dysbiosis, but other factors also, which are extremely important, rather than just one single factor. But that is a factor which we have to start looking, which we were not looking at all.
Sure. Great. Thank you. Thank you, sir. Dr. Mankul, over to you. And if any take home or a couple of lines for us to remember.
Yeah, I think we've talked all about the theory. The last part is the mental block and the social challenge that gluten elimination poses to us. And there, the simplest thing I tell my patients is that what is the point of eating something that your body is rejecting just for a social cause or just for the taste? So it's about honoring our body and listening to our body. If your body is saying no to something, the first priority for a human being it is to respect the message from the body and eliminate that. And rest everything will take care of itself. Thank you.
In fact, Mankal Gita says that, respect your body, listen to your body, and, take what is needed, not what is not needed.
Absolutely, sir. So this is actually, the take.
Ishi, you couldn't be agreeing more to me than anybody else, being a dietitian. Everybody who comes to you is eating more than he should.
Yes. So I have a very good one on this. It says, eat the food that you love, but also the food that loves your body. So it kind of says it all.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. It's been very insightful as always. And thank you, Kandhari sir and Dr. Tom and Dr. Mankul and Ishi ma'am. And Saloni for sharing your candid thoughts and your experience also. We are very grateful. Also very grateful to everybody who tuned in today and took the time. And Arjun, over to you. And if you have any closing comments or would like to thank the panelists and the audience.
Well, this is one of the times when, Dr. Dang, you did the introductions for me as well. And thank you so much for taking that load off my shoulders for today. But ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for attending this lovely webinar. As we do every month, a subject on the line related to wheat-related disorders, I believe we are moving in the direction of creating higher awareness of wheat-related disorders, which is the entire objective behind these series of webinars. And the larger cross-section of people that get into this level of awareness is going to be building a healthy India thereafter and a healthy world to go with. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today for your valuable time and effort.
Bye. Have a good evening.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.